Hi everyone. Trying to pin this so you all know what we're doing here today. Going live. If you guys can hear me, okay, just please give me a thumbs up. Just let me know if you guys can hear me. We are here today to do a second session on kind of this material palette series that we've started. We've had a lot of interest. It sort of started with a couple of posts that we started doing on Instagram, and we realized that there was a lot of interest. So we thought we'll answer some of the questions through Instagram live rather than having to type everything out. So I believe we've run another study with another Instagram story with asking you guys for questions. So we accumulated a whole bunch. I think IPS is very much in vogue right now. So definitely, something that is of interest to many people. And, also it's something that's maybe an art that's sort of getting lost in terms of the workmanship. And therefore, I think there are a lot of questions. I also really like these Instagram lives that we're doing because we're really dissecting, material, and we're talking about implementation, and we're talking about maintenance. Like, we're talking about real issues. We're not just talking about aesthetics and what looks beautiful. I think that a lot of design magazines are doing that really well, and Instagram is obviously full of pretty pictures. So it's kind of nice to do a deep dive into actually what it entails to implement some of these techniques and strategies, and also what are the potential problems that someone can face if going in for using any of these materials. So let me get started with the questions. I'm going to get rid of this image if I can. Yep. Okay. So welcome everyone again. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to keep it short and answer some of the questions that we've already collected, and maybe we'll take up some of the questions from the live itself. So jumping right into it, we're talking about IPS. IPS stands for Indian Patent Stone. It is basically a cement finish. It can be done in many colors. Traditionally, it was mostly done in like a deep red color. So you see that a lot in old houses in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. The beauty of this lovely finish is that in those houses, the floor still shines. There is still that mirror finish, which is extremely difficult to achieve today, actually. But yeah, that is our goal. Every time any of us are doing IPS, we're trying to achieve that level of finish and that beauty, which basically stays for a long time. So it's not like sticking vinyl on an existing floor, right? So that's what you can also do that, but you will start. It'll start to show that it is kind of like a cheap option, and it will start to crack and come off and all of that. But IPS here is something that you can do, which will just stay for years and years. In fact, we had a comment on our Instagram post where someone actually wrote that they've had IPS in their home for 80 years and it still looks beautiful. And you guys can all see it as well if you visit any of the ancestral homes in south of India, and even the palaces and temples. So I also think that there is a lot of interest in IPS these days because there is a general interest in more rustic finishes, which I am a big proponent of. We love to integrate rustic finishes with contemporary aesthetic in our buildings. So I really enjoy seeing a lot more of IPS in being used in India these days. I guess to begin, the first question is, what are the basic things to consider if you're going for an IPS finish? Okay, so IPS looks beautiful. It can be a beautiful seamless finish. You can do it on the floor. You can take it up on the walls. You can even do it on the ceiling. It's a natural finish, so it's not perfect. So you won't just get one perfect color that just kind of runs through. It will be patchy. It will have patches of light color, dark color. It may actually become, certain areas may become more white over time, and things like that. So in a way, it's a living sort of natural finish. So as it ages, it will change. And I'm talking about the IPS that we do now, because it's very difficult, as I said again, to achieve the IPS that was historically done. So you have to understand that if you are going for an IPS finish, it will be something that will age, that will change. It may develop cracks, and you just have to live with it. So you have to love it enough to live with some of the flaws. So it will not be a perfect finish if, for example, if you were just going for a tile finish, which will just look like that, for a very long time. Other things to remember is that workmanship is very critical to IPS. So basically, it's all about the workmanship. The materials that are actually used in IPS are very simple, and we'll go into the whole process, but the materials that are used are very simple. So it's really all about workmanship. And what you have to remember is that you can't redo an IPS finish. So basically, if it's messed up once, it's always going to be messed up. So no matter, even if you break it and redo it, which we have done in one of our projects, I'm just being very honest here. We did do that in one of our projects, but the lesson that I learned was that, even if you rip it apart, do it all over again from scratch, the finish will never be, perfect. So the point is, you have to do it once, you have to do it really carefully, and it's all about workmanship. So that's I think the second thing that you have to remember if you're deciding to go for IPS. Yeah. So we'll go into a lot more detail, I guess, in a little while. Zina is asking us, what does IPS stand for? IPS stands for Indian Patent Stone. Some of the stuff you can Google, so let's keep the easy Googling stuff out of our Instagram lives, and kind of maybe focus on things that are not so easy to find, like the knowledge that's not so easy to find. Okay, then, so the second question we have, which I think is the meat, is what is the procedure for the application of IPS? So IPS is basically something that's very simple. So on a finished floor surface, what you do is you actually do a cement plaster, which you, have to let it sort of semi-dry, and then there is a cement slurry, which is actually the one that's mixed with the color, that you spread over the cement plaster, and that has to be finished by hand with a trowel, and then a very experienced artisan should actually be finishing that and then coming out of the room so that it can be kind of left untouched. And then a very important step is that it has to be cured. Now what happens is that contractors these days, because everything has to be really fast, everything has to be done really fast, and there are deadlines and timelines, contractors will tell you that you can cure it for just a week and get away with it. I would say that is one of the potential problems. We should basically at least cure it for 2 weeks. A story here about when I was first exposed to IPS is when I was actually training, doing my architectural internship in Oroville. I was actually working at the Earth Institute with an architect called Satprem, and he had finished a lovely little, like a one-room home for himself in a beautiful sort of an arch-shaped domed roof, which he did in with mud blocks, and then the floor was supposed to be red oxide IPS flooring, and and there was this one person there who actually was sort of Satprem's right hand man, and I basically worked with him in actually polishing the floor. So that's where my love for this beautiful floor comes from, and it's just absolutely impossible to kind of replicate the kind of attention they paid in Auroville to the flooring process and to the polishing process today. But we try to enforce this, the same process that I learned in Auroville when we do our IPS floors in Goa. But it's still sort of, we have not been able to achieve the 100% quality as in Auroville because, I don't know why, but that's the way it is. So once the IPS is dry, then that's when we come to the polishing stage. And in the polishing stage, we basically, sandpaper it slightly with emery paper, and then after cleaning, you polish it with a solution made with mason polish and coconut oil, and you apply that with in Auroville we used to apply that with coconut husk. Here, even though however much we try to push the coconut husk, we have not been able to have our sort of masons use that, so they use rags and they polish the floor with it. So that's the process of application of IPS. Also, IPS basically tends to develop a lot of cracks sometimes, and I think that happens because of the way it dries and it kind of lets go of the moisture. So it's really about how much moisture it absorbs, how much it lets go, and that basically expansion contraction is what leads to the cracks, in my opinion. And again, as I said, it's impossible to redo IPS. So if you get the cracks, you basically learn to love them and learn to live with them. Okay, next question. Are there only colors like gray, red and yellow possible while using IPS, or are there more possibilities? So originally they used to use red because they would put iron oxide, they would mix iron oxide with the cement, and nowadays, and gray is basically just using the cement, and you can also do various shades of gray by adding white cement to it. So you can actually add more white cement, less white cement. There are also different brands of cement have a different shade of grayness that comes out, so you can try many samples, and these days in the market you can get many colors. So you can do yellow, green, blue, black, and then we've this time done a lovely kind of a pink and peach color in one of our projects. So and from what again I learned in Auroville, they say that the red and pink come out beautifully, and they say that yellow and especially blue and green tends to fade a lot. And they're darker colors, so even if they get the white, especially green and blue, if they get the white patches, then it starts to look more patchy than something like a yellow or a light gray, because in that the patchiness will not show so much. But once again, sorry, I keep repeating this, that you have to love that imperfection of IPS. If you don't, then this is not the right material for you to use. Okay, next question. How expensive is IPS? Does the cost change based on color? So IPS is actually not that expensive. It's an inexpensive finish to apply. But the critical thing is if you find the right, sort of right artisan to apply it for you. So that you have to be very confident about. A choice of color does not make a difference to the cost of IPS. Okay, how does one get the polished look? What kind of wax is used and how is it added? So that I already explained. You basically, after the IPS is cured for 2 weeks and after you clean it, you have to apply a wax, which is a solution of mason wax and coconut oil. And then you buff it with, again, a rag or with coconut husk. I mean, there are also like, I've seen things like where, there is like a person will sit on a big piece of cloth, and two people will hold the rag on either ends, and then they just like pull the person all over the floor, so that the weight of the person who's sitting on the rag is actually, the weight on the rag, and it's actually buffing the floor. So I've seen that happen as well. And, we have to give credit to our, lovely sort of experts on the site who, are not so fortunate, but they're very talented, and they do so many things that, we can design on paper, but we can't even begin to do on the site ourselves. I also want to mention here that when I was talking about the cracks, right? So one of the ways to prevent cracking can potentially be to lay the IPS in panels in a limited, panels of limited size. So if you can use some kind of dividers, which traditionally used to be glass strips. So if you can use those and limit the size of each individual panel of the IPS, then that can reduce the cracking, can potentially reduce the cracking. Recommended in general, the size of the panel that's recommended in general is maybe like 5 feet by 5 feet is the largest that they recommend, which I'm talking about my contractor recommends. Traditionally, obviously, it was done without any, sort of much division. So yeah, it's really up to you what you want to go with. Another interesting thing that people have started doing these days is to actually use brass strips for division in the IPS floor, which can look really nice. But just a word of caution, like we have had a case in which, where the brass strip was cutting through the IPS there, it basically, the IPS didn't take on to the brass strip so well. So we've had some sort of separation there and cracks and things like that there. Yeah, so that, now next question is, how durable is IPS? How can one prevent cracks? So I already spoke about the cracks. Durable, it's pretty durable, but yes, if you, if something very, very heavy falls on it, then it can sort of just crack and break, because obviously, it is a very thin layer of cement slurry that's actually the top finish. Okay. How much maintenance does IPS require during and post construction? So IPS, after construction, after it's done and you've started living in the house, it pretty much requires no maintenance. You can just mop it every day and it will shine. And the more mopping we do, initially, the more it will kind of shine the floor. So yeah, no maintenance is required really, and it should stay beautiful for a long time. Can IPS be used on the floor of a shower area? So yes, it's very much in vogue. We've used it many times, and it's something that I think looks really beautiful, because in bathrooms, because they're smaller spaces, you can do a seamless finish where you're not worried about cracks, you're not worried about doing divisions, and so you can actually take the entire IPS on the floor, on the walls, on the sink counter, everything, so you can get this beautiful monochromatic kind of a look for the bathroom, and a very rustic look. It also feels really beautiful under your feet, also when you touch. So it's a lovely finish to actually use for bathrooms. And yes, you can use it in the shower area, but it will not again remain beautiful and in its original state everywhere, especially where the shower water hits the floor directly. That's where you may it depends. It really depends on what will happen, but there are the sort of things that I've seen is that sometimes it becomes rough, so it doesn't stay very smooth, where the water directly hits the IPS, and sometimes it may actually also get some algae and so start blackening. Okay, next question. Does the color finish of the original look stay unchanged there as well? So I answered that question. And I think the next question is also about water in the bathroom. So I answered that question already. Does IPS get slippery when wet? Yes, it does. So there we do have a bunch of questions about use of IPS outdoors. So I would say that if it is a completely sort of exposed area, then it is not recommended to use IPS, because first it gets slippery, second it will start to develop algae if it is sort of after it gets wet in the rains. And if you're using a darker color, then it will start to get very patchy, because wherever the rain is hitting it and water is hitting it directly, there it will start to fade and start to develop white patches. So even if you're using it externally, I would say at least make sure that the area is semi-covered and not completely exposed. And yes, it does get slippery, so it could be a hazard. Can IPS be a replacement for wall paint? How is it different from lime plaster? So this is a question that's actually repeated a couple of times about difference between IPS and lime plaster. So this is very interesting, and we'll go into it. But let me answer the first part of the question first, which is, can IPS be a replacement for wall paint? Yes, it can be. You have seen lovely, beautiful homes done by Vijay Jain, where he's taken the IPS on the floor and on the walls, and there is obviously no need to paint them anymore. And how different is IPS from lime plaster? Okay, so in the north of India, you see a lot of lime being used as sort of this IPS-like finish, and it's called the Araish finish. And you'll see it in palaces. You'll see them still shining. It's also called the stucco finish sometimes. And you'll hear all sorts of recipes. I don't know, I've never done it, so I'm just talking from experience that I've heard all sorts of recipes of what goes into this this sort of magical Araish finish, from eggshells to marble powder to soft powder, and all sorts of things which just make it sound like a magic potion. And it just sounds like this is some recipe that it clearly is only held. It's a secret recipe that's only held by very few people. But that said, recently I've come across something really lovely called M-Lime. So you guys please look it up. I think I also it's a woman founder, Malvika, and she is the woman founder, and she's running it. So anyways, I'm a big supporter of women enterprises, so that's another reason why I'm giving her a shout out here. So basically what she's done is that she's developed this lime paste that is actually sent to the site as a paste and not as a powder. And she has also trained a bunch of her artisans to who can actually come to your site and help you with application of this particular lime, which can be used as a mortar or even as a lime plaster. So guys, look it up. I hope that with her sort of innovation, and what she's trying to do is, basically, lime is a difficult material to use because of all the slacking requirement, and the storage is really tough. So what she's doing is she's making it more user friendly, and she's also dispensing information and skill on how it can be applied. So I really hope that she can really spread this information more and more, and we can use a lot more lime over cement in our buildings. And the reason why generally lime is considered as a better alternative than cement is because lime is Again, it's natural, so therefore it breathes. So basically, first of all, it hardens over time, but the point is that it absorbs moisture, but then once it gets dry, it will release moisture. So the thing is that every time you are trapping moisture in your building, that's when you have leakages. So as long as your building and your walls and everything, it's breathable, you have less chances of waterlogging and therefore any kind of dampness showing up. So so that's lime plaster. IPS is not lime plaster because we're adding cement instead of lime. So that's the difference between lime plaster and IPS. Okay, so quickly I'm going to take up some questions from here. We have about 4 minutes left. Okay. So what sort of projects would you suggest using IPS for? Yes, it is, and he's saying, to my understanding, it looks earthy and rustic. Yes, of course, it looks earthy and rustic. It's beautiful. It feels beautiful on your feet, as I said. So it's lovely for, anywhere where you feel like you'll walk barefoot. Think temples, think like, glorious sort of, luxurious spaces where, you just want to abandon any kind of, restrictions or whatever, like need to be a certain way and just, be yourself and be comfortable. Like those are the spaces you should try to use IPS. Pros and cons, we already discussed. Need for maintenance also. I think we've covered most of these questions. Okay, I think the only one question, which is a really nice question, is that is IPS suitable for kitchen counters? So yes, really lovely question. I have seen it being used at many places, and it again looks really lovely because you can put it on your counter. You can actually even take it down to your shelving. You can make it into a backsplash, so it looks really lovely. From what I understand, it is a little bit high maintenance. Because it is a kitchen, maybe like it can get stained, or even if you're say chopping or something. And honestly, sorry guys, but I don't know what is the impact of putting something hot on an IPS surface, but that's something we can maybe maybe try in our office and let you know what the impact is. But it's been used, but I would say that if it's a very heavy duty kitchen, then maybe it's best to be avoided. Okay, so I think we've covered most of these questions. So just to wrap it up, I also want to say that IPS has become so popular these days that there are a lot of other techniques that are also available which look like IPS. So for example, there are these and maybe some of these things are imported, but there are these paints nowadays that you get, which basically it's an IPS type of finish, but it's a paint. So it's a brush on paint that you can do to achieve the IPS finish. There are also a lot of panels that are available now, which look like IPS. So that's another possibility. And I'm talking about for panels, obviously it will be if you want to use it for your walls or for your cabinetry and things like that. There is also, sorry, I'm losing my chain of thought, but I've also come across these, actually they're like paper. It's actually like paper, but it looks like IPS, so that can also be mounted on walls and again cabinets and cupboards and things like that that look like IPS. And there are obviously ceramic tiles and vitrified tiles in the market that look like IPS, very much look like IPS. So if those are also really good options to kind of consider to get the same finish, because I obviously believe that there is no reason for us to, we should definitely keep the art of beautiful hand done IPS, but depending on your clients, depending on your limitations for each individual project, you can definitely look at some of these alternatives. So I think we are good with IPS. You guys can send us more questions if if you have any that we've not really answered, and we will do another session next Friday, and we're going to do it on wood. I will share with you what I know about the material, which obviously is not everything there is to know, but that's a start. Hopefully it will help you in maybe doing some more research or asking more questions to your contractors and carpenters next time you guys are on the site. So next Friday we'll do a session at the same time on wood. We may keep doing these sessions. We may make it a kind of a permanent Friday afternoon fixture. So if you guys have any other topics in mind that interest you, then please let us know. We also may get some people who are doing some of this really well, some work really well, and we may talk to them. So yeah, we love feedback. So send us feedback about who you would like to hear from. What are the things? I guess the point here is that, let's talk about real meaty topics. So let's not talk about just, aesthetically pleasing, beautiful pictures. So, if there is anything, like one of the things I was thinking was about, if one wants to build a koi pond, then how do you go about it, right? So we can actually bring in an expert and talk about what it takes to build a koi pond. So those are the kind of like really meaty topics that I hope to touch on, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you all for tuning in. I believe we had a whole bunch of people, and see you next Friday. Thanks a lot. Bye guys.